We were just talking this morning about how important it is to bring awareness to every moment. It's needed no matter what's going on. One of the things that I had to fight or deal with earlier in my life was addictions. And addictions are really interesting because when you find yourself caught in any kind of addiction, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a drug addiction, it could be an alcohol addiction, it could be an eating addiction or a relationship or sex addiction, or it could be just about anything. But when you're caught in it, it's almost like the addiction feeds on unconsciousness. It finds some way to get to you through a craving, through some deep desire that grabs you at a deep level. And when it does, it creates an urge that has a tremendous amount of power, and then that urge gets you into a mode where it's driving you. Now, stop and look at that. Of course, that's the hardest thing for an addict to do. That's the hardest thing for somebody who's caught in the grip of it to do, is to right there in that moment when the urge is strong and they're being driven toward the drug, or driven to go to the refrigerator and get the food and start eating it,
chocolate,
or driven towards whatever it is. The hardest thing at that moment for that person to do is to just stop, be present, experience the space in the moment, and just to bring awareness to everything. It's the last thing in the world that they want to do. Now, there is some idea that if I go and satisfy the urge, that is the thing to be sought, that is the thing to be desired, that's what I need. Not to sit here. It would make no sense to sit here and just be quiet when the urge needs to be fulfilled. Time's a waste, and I need to do it, and I need to do it right now. So it's really interesting to bring consciousness and bring awareness right in that moment. If you do that, it's amazing what happens, because as you look at the urge and as you experience the fullness of that moment. See, the thing is, when you're caught up in that urge, you cannot experience the fullness of this moment, because the urge is driving you to the next moment. The urge is driving you to a future event. It's driving you to something that's missing, that must be achieved, because without that I'm nothing. Without that I'm empty. I've got to go get it. And that whole place that puts you in is so off, and it's so opposite of presence, and it's so opposite of awareness, and it's so opposite of all of that. And at that moment you're so far away from who you are and experiencing who you are and what this moment is, that you're lost. And so we have 12-step groups, and we have treatment centers, and we have self-help books, and we have group therapy and therapists and all kinds of things to try to help us to deal with it. Well, the real help needs to happen. I mean, you can get philosophical help when you're not right in the middle of the urge. In other words, let's say you're an addict and you're watching this, okay, but you just shot up. Okay, well, probably you wouldn't be watching this at that point because you're
Maybe not.
just not in the mood for this kind of a video. But
Right.
let's say a few days have gone by or some time has gone by, and but you're not, you know, in the middle of the urge. Okay, so there can be some value in philosophically understanding the concept and getting a grasp on how things work and what I need to do and so forth. That's just philosophy. That and $3 will give you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. I mean, it's kind of pointless. What you really need, if you're ever going to break the addiction, is to bring presence in the moment. It's a real-time activity. It's something that changes in the moment that your awareness has to come to. Well, we don't know how to do that because when we're caught in the urge, we're of course, as the 12-step groups say, I'm powerless at that moment. Well, of course you're powerless because you're nowhere to be found. You know, who you are is so obscured in that moment because you're caught in the hunt, you're lost in the search, you're lost in the urge, and you are nowhere to be found. That thing that's driving you is something not you. And as long as you identify with it, and there's no presence and there's no awareness, you can have all the philosophy you want, but the philosophy at that moment, what good is it? It's not going to help you. So understanding that the real breaking of any addiction is in the presence. And if a 12-step group can help you to disidentify, to identify in a different way, to rely on your higher power, even to call a sponsor at a moment of weakness or lostness, well then great. Whatever you have to do, you do. But ultimately, it's just this moment. And in this moment, awareness allows you to see, allows you to feel, allows you to experience. And to learn to bring presence to addiction is the beginning of breaking through to some form of enlightened living, because the reality is we're all addicts. We all have mild forms of addiction that drive us, not necessarily a heroin addiction or a cocaine addiction or a food addiction, although that could be a big part of it too. But just all these little things, whatever it is that drives us here and drives us here unconsciously, to bring that awareness to it makes such a huge difference. And what is it that brings you back? What is it that brings you back? Evelyn and I this morning were talking about loss, which is almost like a form of death when you lose something. You could lose your health when you realize you have cancer. You could maybe, well, I'll give you a case in point that started the conversation. I lost my Amazon Kindle. I left it on an airplane and realized a couple of days later that I can't find it, and finally figured out where it is. Okay, gone. It's gone. And so what do? Well, there's a little wake-up call. It's available whether you wake up or not. It rings and it says, oh, there's a problem. There's loss.